Flipping loops and samples is a crucial skill to have as a music producer. Sometimes you'll get loops from other producers, or sometimes you'll find a record or just a random sound that you want to sample and turn into a beat. Either way, every producer should be able to find the key and the BPM of a sample to make sure they can make it into a proper beat. If you don't know what those terms mean, it's okay, I'm going to go into them at a later part in this video. My name is Stafford Beats, and I'm going to be breaking down all of these skills so you can get started making beats right away. Let's get right into it. Luckily for you, now is a great time to get into beat making with other people's samples. A ton of producers make and send out samples for free, and a lot of the information needed to flip those samples is already included when they send them out. Today, I'm actually going to be flipping one of the samples from my unhinged loop kit, which you can get on my website, The Producer Crate, absolutely free. We've got a ton of other free downloads on the site available as well, and there's some paid sample packs in case you prefer royalty-free samples. Alrighty, so I've got my unhinged sample pack open, and I'm going to start going through some of the samples and pick one out.
What do you think, you're better than me?
I like this one. We're gonna flip this sample right here. This sample is called Sinister. All you have to do to start is just drag your loop in, and you'll notice there's a lot of different sections on this loop. Now every single one of these sections is actually gonna be one of the stems from this whole sample. So you can see all together the sample sounds like this. Which is fire. But there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes you're not going to want to have every part playing at the same time, so we've got stems at the end of the loop. So we'll talk about how to use those stems in just a little bit, but we have to figure out two major things before we start making a beat on this sample. Number one is the key, and number two is the BPM. Now those are going to be the most important parts to remember every single time that you flip a sample, use somebody else's loop, or anything like that. BPM stands for beats per minute. Beats per minute is just a fancy way of saying speed or tempo. A lot of songs are going to range somewhere between 70 BPM and 200 BPM. The key refers to the melodic scale that's used in the sample or song. There's a ton of variations and weird scales out there, but the only two that we're going to focus on right now is major and minor. Now what a scale is essentially just a collection of notes that are all put together that sound good together. You'll notice if you just play random keys on the piano, some sounds are going to be good together and some not so much. As long as you're staying within the key or the scale that your sample is in, a lot of the time it'll sound okay. Just think of it as a guideline for your melodic elements. Now, we're not going to get into any kind of music theory or anything like that in this video. We'll cover that in another video, but it is important to know the key of your loops so you can put your 808s in the right spot, or you can add other melodic elements on top. Most producers actually put the key and the BPM of their loop inside of the title of the loop, so it makes it a lot easier for you to just get into it and flip it right away. You can see, for example, on this title it says Sinister, Lil Baby, because that's the type of loop it is and the name, and 134, which is going to be the BPM, and F minor. If it just says F, it's usually going to be F major, but if there's a little M after it, that means it's minor. Now, if for some reason your loop or sample doesn't have the key or BPM in it, let's say you just sampled something off YouTube and you're trying to figure out what it is, I'm going to show you a super easy way to find that. So we're going to head over to TuneBat, and all you have to do is click on this key in BPM Finder, scroll down, and select the file that you want to figure out. So I put our file in, and it said it's F minor and 66 BPM, which unfortunately the BPM is not always right on this. I mainly just use it for the key, but that's okay. So another easy trick to find the BPM is just to move around the tempo until the end of the sample hits the 4 bars or hits some kind of 4-bar segment. You'll notice a lot of samples with stems will also be separated by a certain amount of bars every time. Just try to figure out what that space is. Another way that you can figure out the tempo is using tap tempo. So I'll play the sample, and I'm just gonna right click the tempo and I'm gonna click tap. So you can see that I got the right BPM here, and the way that I did that is I'm just tapping along with the beat. It's not going to be exactly accurate every time, but it helps if you can't figure it out any other way. So since we've already got our BPM here, we can verify that that is the correct BPM, and now we can cut out all of our stems. So we can take each of these, and we'll just make little cuts here. And to do this, I just hit C to go to my cut tool, and I'm holding shift and clicking down on one of these. Now we can move them all into the same spot here, and then after that, I'll just hold shift and right click with the cut tool to automatically cut the extra tails off. So now, all the stems together sound like this. So I'll go ahead and delete this section, and we'll just use the stems now. Now once we have the tempo figured out, we can start thinking about how we want to flip the loop, or if we just want to use it as is. A lot of times people will just use a loop as is, so it's easier to just throw some drums on, finish the beat up, and move on to the next one. It makes the process a whole lot faster. But we're not going to go the easy route this time. The biggest piece of advice I have for anyone trying to flip loops for the first time is experiment as much as you possibly can. There's like a million ways you can flip samples, whether it be changing the BPM, the key, adding some VSTs, reversing the sample, the list goes on. Two of the most common ways that you'll see a loop flipped is the BPM and the key. So let's say we wanted to speed the sample up or slow it down a little bit. FL Studio makes this super easy. We're just gonna go ahead and double click on any part of the sample, and we're gonna change this mode right here from resample to stretch. Now this is just going to lock the sample into these 8 bars, so anytime we move the BPM up or down, they stay the same. So if we move the BPM down to 128, it's going to slow it down and sound like this. Or let's say we wanted to make it faster, like 173, it would sound like this. I want to go somewhere kind of in the middle with this one. Let's try a little bit faster. I like this speed a lot. Now that we've changed the BPM, we can go on to the second most common way that people flip loops, and that's the key. So to flip the key, all we're going to do is double click, and we're going to change this pitch knob. And you'll notice it kind of locks in at each 100 cents, which is at the top left corner of the screen. You want to make sure that you stick to exactly on the hundreds, because that's going to move the sample up or down exact notes. So let's try moving this up 3. So you can see that we're up 300 cents now. So the sample went from F minor, we just count up 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we're at G sharp minor. Now let's try moving it down a little bit. Let's move it 1 up. I like this a lot. So let's keep it here. So now we went from F minor up 1 to F sharp minor. So those are the 2 most common ways that you'll see people flip their samples, and they're the 2 easiest. Now let's talk about some of the more complex ways you can flip them. I'm gonna go ahead and open up my channel rack right here, and I'm gonna find my sample, Sinister, right here, and I'm gonna hit Control L to automatically route it to a mixer track. Alternatively, you can just pick a number here, you can drag it up and down, but I like doing the Control L trick. It makes it a lot easier to find it in the mixer track if you ever lose one of your samples. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Gross Beat. I'm going to mess with some different presets here and see what I can find. This one is from our Chroma bank that we put out. I love this bank. I like to mess around with a lot of types of samples on it. One of the benefits to using VSTs to flip the samples, you can oftentimes get effects you'd never be able to get just by messing with the sample itself. I kind of like this preset. I think we're gonna go with this. There's a ton of other plugins you can use, and like I said, really just try to experiment as much as you possibly can. For the sake of this beat, we're just gonna keep it with this gross beat preset, but feel free to try switching it up as much as you can. Now let's go ahead and turn this into a full beat. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this pattern 1 to start adding some drums. This is one of the drum kits that I've been using in all the tutorial videos for beginner producers because it just has all the sounds that you need. There's a lot of drum kits out there that are more expensive that have like all these crazy and weird sounds, which is great to get into, but it's also important to have a kit like this that just has a little bit of everything in it. So we have a free version available on the site, and we have the full version that has a few more sounds for 10 bucks. Let's start cooking up. That sounds fire already, oh my god. And if you don't know what you're doing with drums yet, stop this video and go back to my first video on how to make your first beat as a music producer, because I go a little bit more in depth with the drums. That snare roll at the end is crazy. What? Oh my god, this beat is sounding crazy. So now that we've finished making the main part of the drums, we're gonna add the 808. Now this is why knowing the key of your sample is super important. The 808 has to be in key because it's technically a melodic element. It has a tone to it. So we need to make sure that it's on key. So you can see that this stem here is the bass. And what we want to do with our 808 is just try to figure out what key the bass is in. Now this sample is pretty easy to follow along with because there's only one root note. So let's pick out an 808. I like the way this one sounds. Let's go with that. So after we get our 808 in, we're just gonna go over here, turn the whole knob all the way up and everything else all the way down. And then I'm just gonna boost it a little bit. And now our 808 sounds like this. Just hits a little bit harder. We need that extra crunch, that little sizzle. So now we're gonna listen to the bass and we're gonna see if we can figure out the same key. So a trick I like to do is move the 808 to a higher scale where it sounds like this, because you can hear the note in it a little bit easier. You can see this kind of has the same tone to it, so it's going to be an F sharp. So while we're making our 808, we want to turn off the bass. So we're going to go ahead and press T and click on that, and it's just going to mute that one. So now we can work on our 808. So right here, this technically isn't in the root note, but I'm just gonna mess around with it to see what sounds good, because I don't want it to just be playing one note the entire time. Copy that over here. So now we've got all our major parts to the beat, and all that's left to do is arrange. So we've got an intro, a chorus, a verse, and some kind of bridge. That's gonna be our whole beat. So this is what the sample sounded like before we did anything else to it. This is what it sounds like all together. That is crazy. So that's really all it takes to flip a sample. So you can see by just adding those little things, it made a really big difference in how the beat turned out. Now you possess some of the most important knowledge you're ever gonna know as a music producer. If you need more loops to use, we've got a ton of free kits on the producer crate, as well as some paid ones. And we also have a Discord server full of a community who is always sending in free loops for people to use. Just make sure you give them credit and follow their terms of use. I'll put a link to the server down in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you learned something from this video, and drop a comment and let me know what your favorite type of beat to make is right now. This video is actually part of a complete beginner series that I'm working on. It's going to be all on YouTube. There's no paid courses. It's all 100% free. If you're brand new to making beats, I highly recommend checking out the other videos on my channel just to start learning a little bit more. And honestly, no matter how good you get at making beats, you can always have room for more knowledge. Make sure to subscribe, turn my notifications on, and drop a like on the video if you're feeling really generous. It helps me out a lot. I'll see you in the next video.